short video which is going to help to explain how to complete your learning journal entry. I'm here with Kate Kelly, who's one of our tutors in TLC120, who actually wrote the learning journal example entry. So we're going to talk through for you each of the sections and how she came to answer them. So welcome, Kate.
Hi, everybody.
So the first few questions in the learning journal entry ask you to identify the key words and key concepts for each different topic that we cover in each entry. So how did you go about finding that information?
Okay, well, so for this first question, question 1, identify 3 key words and 2 key concepts. This linked to the topic student stories. The first thing I did was to look through the unit guide and see if there were any hints there for learning outcomes and also what they identified as the key concepts. They're usually in your reader though. So I looked through those first before I even started, and then I started doing my readings and rereadings of the text. So I just kept on reading it through. Personally, I'm a rereader, so I need to read things through quite a few times until they make sense to me. And I try to make little notes as I go that explain to myself when I go back there what that particular paragraph was all about. Okay, so once I've done that, then I try to decide what the overall theme or the argument is, and what I guess in general the reading was discussing. So in this case, I decided that the 3 keywords that would be that contain a lot of basically what the whole reading's about is university, learning, and students. And I thought these 2 key concepts best describe what the text in general is about.
And so did you then reflect then on the information that was in the unit guide to see if those ideas that you pulled out of the reading match with the learning objectives for that particular week to come up with those themes for the topic?
Yeah, I'd say that was that's a good point that I made. I used my critical thinking. We'll be discussing that further on in the course, but I used, I guess, what I already know about the reading, what I know about university in general, just what I know about how to complete an assessment like this, and I made a judgment call.
Awesome. So our next question is to provide the full bibliographic details of the reading, and this week's reading was one of them was Viv Cananda and Shaw's reading, and it asked you to do that in Chicago style. So I guess, how did you go about finding that information, and why do you think that's important that that's included in an entry like this?
Okay, so it's really important at university that we acknowledge all of our sources properly. So I guess from my perspective, it just is reinforcing the importance of that by asking us to provide the full bibliographic details. And I knew from my tutoring that all of the bibliographic details for all the readings are actually on the contents page of the reader. So yeah, I just went straight there and copied it exactly.
That's a really good way to learn quite quickly how to do it.
It's a hint.
It's a hint. It is a hint. And if you're struggling, there's also the library citation guide, which we can use to work out what they want you to include for Chicago style. And so this next question, the key terms and concepts of the actual reading as opposed to the topic, Kate's covered that a little bit already, but can you tell us a little bit more about these key concepts maybe?
Yeah, I guess this was a place where I could again engage a bit more of that critical thinking to work out what I thought Viv Cananda and Shaw's were actually saying rather than maybe the way in which they were saying it. I sort of was another space that was useful in trying to sort of get me to think about what the main points of this reading were.
And I guess the next part of this learning journal entry expands on that by asking you to identify the thesis of the whole reading.
Yeah.
And so, what do we mean when we say what's the thesis of a reading or a paper?
Yeah. So it's like the main argument of the reading. So at university, arguing is a good thing, not a bad thing, and everybody needs to have a point of view, or you need to take a particular position about a text when you read it. So the challenge was for me to try and find out what it was that Vivekananda and Shaw's were arguing, what they were presenting as their major kind of theme, I suppose. And yet, it took me quite a while to try and work out exactly not just what they were saying, but how they were saying what they were saying, because that's important in terms of this particular thesis.
And I guess something we can add to this is that Kate and I, when we were trying to identify the thesis of this reading, we actually had a bit of a back and forth, and we had a bit of a conversation about what we thought was that key argument of the reading. And so there was a bit of reflection and critical thinking going on there as well, in terms of how we actually word it as a thesis, as a statement of argument.
Yeah.
So I guess it's good at this point to say that identifying the thesis is quite a difficult thing to do at times, I think.
And it's definitely something that you put up. I guess you'd put up a draft or a first go, and then you'd sort of allow some time to think about it and maybe see how it rests within the other forms of your journal entry. So when you're looking, what I actually discovered was that in doing the content, which is further down, the summary, and then the analysis, that these all these different parts of the assessment actually inform each other. So once I'd got to the end of one process, I'd go back and make sure that I was still that all the parts made sense, I guess. So that I'd go back and look at the thesis again, and then I'd go back and look at the key concepts again, and make sure that they're all they all fit together.
Yeah, that's great advice. Our next section is quite a meaty section of the learning journal, as you'll see if you're looking at the example. This is the summary of the reading itself, including a couple of quotations. So how did you take quite a lengthy reading, Kate, and condense it into a summary?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one that obviously I've got better at my time at uni. I've been at uni for about 10 years, so I've got better at these kinds of assessments and tasks. But I guess the important thing to mention is about just trying to pick out what the main points are, rather than trying to include everything. So again, use your critical thinking and your reflection just to try and tease out what the major threads are, what's important and what's not so important. So the other thing I tried to do in this paragraph was to try and make it all make sense as a paragraph to someone who may never have read the reading. So I didn't assume any formal knowledge about this reading on behalf of Ange or whoever your tutor would be. I just tried to make it, give everything I could to the reader in terms of consideration, to make it, make sense within its own self.
That's another piece of great advice there as well, because often we do get caught up in it, and we know that it's going to a tutor who's read it, and it is probably quite a good structural piece of advice there. If it makes sense by itself as a standalone couple of paragraphs or a paragraph, then that's going to be really, really helpful. We've been speaking a lot about the reading and summarising the reading, but a big part of the Learning Journal entry is the final section, which is the largest section, which is sorry, I've missed one. I'll backtrack. Before we get to that, you need to complete a paraphrase. And the paraphrase is actually, I think, one of the hardest skills to develop, especially in first year, because a lot of first year students tend to just take the quote and rearrange it, put it back to front, and get their thesaurus out and find some synonyms and replace it. And completing a paraphrase, I don't think personally is that easy. What do you think, Kate? How did you come about your own paraphrase here?
Yeah, I think you're right about paraphrasing. It's so important because we can't use a lot of directly quoted material in our work, and so being able to use paraphrasing is really important in terms of being able to meet the task of writing an essay. And everything that we claim at university has to have that. Any knowledge claim has to be considered for a reference. So we also need to. It's kind of like a glove in hand kind of thing. We need to know how to paraphrase so that we can acknowledge another author properly, and also so we can present our ideas properly. So yeah, it's critical, and yeah, it's not so easy, but again, you do get better with practice. As I tell my students, if you're perfect, you learn nothing. So make sure you have a go.
And that's what this section is, and has been included in the Learning Journal for, is it's actually been included so you have that opportunity to practice your paraphrases and practice your referencing and get some feedback on it before you use these things in a more weighty assessment piece such as an essay. You've got lots of opportunities to learn throughout this Learning Journal entry. Now we move on to the really meaty section, which is what I was getting to before, which is this critical reflection. And as I said, we have spoken a lot about the reading for the week. And we do at university speak a lot about readings, because readings are a really important part of your academic journey. You could be doing a lot of reading, and so we want to learn how to get the most out of our readings. So that's why we do things like summaries and pulling the thesis out and learning how to reference and use those in our work. But we also want to know how the reading actually works in relation to the topic and the overall unit, and how all these things kind of get pieced together, as Kate said before. So, Kate, how did you, I guess, focus your writing when you came to this critical reflection? Because it's drawing on not just the reading, but the other elements of the topic and the lecture as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the summary section is really about what the author has said, and the analysis section actually allows us to to step back even further and to look at what the author has said in the context of other texts, and also to try and portray to the reader what we think about the reading, how it actually, what it means, and some of the, I guess, more interesting for me aspects of academic work, in terms of being able to talk about the importance of a particular idea in a reading or a context. So yeah, these analysis paragraphs are a great way of accessing, I guess, a little bit more of a intellectual academic approach to meaning making. And after all, that's what we're here at uni to do, is to try and construct meaning and to make connections between different ideas and concepts. So I would like to say here that what I try to do is to sort of, from the outset, sort of like this first sentence, I tried to basically encapsulate the whole within that, the whole of this paragraph within that first. We call it a topic sentence. Yeah, that's right. It's the way that we kind of, it's a headline, to the paragraph. So what I tried to do there is to basically summarize the whole of what I was trying to say just in that one sentence, which is difficult, but you feel you feel quite empowered when you've been able to do something like that. Okay, so that's if you like, the overall picture. But then once I've said something like that, I tried to elaborate on that main point and back it up by using particular examples. Yeah, so I tried to kind of work that idea through the paragraph in more detail, and I tried to, I hope it's come across, but I tried to make logical connections between all of the ideas, so it made sense to the reader as well. So if you can provide a flow or like a narrative or a story for the reader, it helps the reader to access what there is to access there in the paragraph.
Yeah, and I think you find, like, I enjoyed that fact that you, could link it to the student panel for that week, which wasn't actually a lecture in itself, and but for students for future entries past the first week, you will find that you'll be linking it to that lecture topic for the week. But for me, that linked quite seamlessly in there, which was great. It was
Thanks,
great. You're welcome. And then there was kind of, you presented this idea, you made these links, and then you kind of reflected on those as well, which is what we like to see when we're reading through these critical analysis or critical reflection paragraphs in these learning journal entries, is to see that critical reflection from the students. So these paragraphs aren't about going, oh, well, I really liked the lecture, or I really liked the reading, it was great. It's like we have to get a lot more deeper than that, and you can see that Kate has done that in these last two paragraphs. So we're really seeing your critical thinking and critical reflection skills coming through in these paragraphs, and you'll hopefully as you progress through the unit, you won't just be linking your critical reflections to the topic for that week and the lecture for that week and the other readings for that week, but you'll actually be able to link to past readings and past lectures as well. So you're kind of building on your bank of knowledge and being able to link all those different introduction to university learning texts together. So you're not just seeing how the topic for the week is structured, but how the overall unit is structured.
Okay, so just a few more things that I'd like to point out about these paragraphs. So in terms of the in-text referencing and its relationship to knowledge, so I've tried to make things to make it based in logical reasoning, as much based in logical reasoning as possible, so that I've used argued description and examples to back up all of my claims. I've also tried to show how you can use analytical or critical content to support your own ideas, and you do this through referencing. So I've tried to show you, basically how to use referencing to bolster your own ideas, and also, yeah, how I've made a note here to talk about how paraphrasing is my friend. Paraphrasing is important, not just in terms of, making a good argument, but also in terms of showing that you can use the protocols of the university culture. Okay, and I've also tried to show you how academic language hedges or suggests something rather than makes general or total claims about things. And I've used the third person to show how an authentic sense of academic distance or consideration can be used to describe a particular feature or an idea. And again, I've tried to produce a good flow between all of the ideas so that the story of those paragraphs makes sense in their own right. Well, I think that's about all.
I think it is, and I think it's great to end with those final notes about how you went about writing it and constructing it, and what you did with the hedges and using the analysis and using the references to bolster your ideas and things like that, because it really shows how important these learning journal entries are. They're not just something that you write at the, really quickly. They're something that actually involves a lot of critical reflection, because there's so many different academic elements that are a part of it that are going to help you to develop your own academic writing, which will then flow on to things like your essay writing as well. So they're a really great opportunity to practice lots of different elements of that academic writing process there.
They sure are. Good luck, everybody.
So thank you for listening, and thank you, Kate.